And so
Now
we have
we're
the
off the
unofficial results for Osceola County, Florida. Here we go. We'll bypass the statewide races for now, but we'll start
Oh,
with
this is the heartbreaker.
yes, yes, it is. In full disclosure, whoa, let me dip out, let me dip back in. In full disclosure, we uh, consulted on the Lenora Easter campaign, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, Lenore did not fare well against Melissa Vickers.
Mhm.
Lenora has a great platform. She was going to bring a lot to the office. However, as my conversation with her stated, she got in late
Yeah.
and it was very difficult to build so much momentum against Melissa Vickers, who started early. She ingratiated herself to the political establishment. She was the
Mhm.
establishment candidate for the public defender's office. She too had a little, some negative.
Tension,
Um,
negative
yes,
press. But
exactly.
yeah, ultimately, like David said, like starting early is a big deal because once someone makes an endorsement, they're not going back. Just as a random example, because that was a big part of the Vickers campaign. It was, I'm endorsed by everybody under the sun except my former boss, but we won't mention that. You know, and being endorsed by everybody under the sun is a great strategy when you're the only one running. It's
That's
quite
true.
easier, I think.
That's true.
If Lenora was out there months earlier, maybe Lenora would have had some of those. Who knows? Starting early makes a big difference, and also just name recognition. People, as dumb as it is, most people don't really research a lot of things. It's a little bit different in August elections because fewer people come out. It's mostly people that are invested in a race or two that come in. But it's a lot of times people will just vote on, I recognize that name. I'm voting that name because they're like embarrassed to not vote or something. Um,
It's a huge gap. 13,000 votes gap.
yeah,
Oh,
and
definitely.
I think Vickers starting as early as she did, getting her signs out, her fundraising, all of that so bright and early,
Hmm.
got her that name recognition. People knew who she was, and I think that was why she won.
Yes. And this is the Osceola County portion of Circuit 9, Judicial Circuit 9. So the results are similar in Orange County. And when we get to the Orange County part, we'll discuss that. But before we go to the next race, I want to show you all a number that I would love for you to keep in mind as we go across all three counties. And I'm going to bounce back to the Seminole County Supervisor of Elections. And I
Ah,
want you to take a look at that number right there.
Oh,
17.7% turnout
wow.
in Osceola County.
Seminole
Unofficially,
County, Seminole County.
thank you, Seminole County. Unofficially, however, this is a good indication of what the turnout is and a reflection of what the turnout was in Central Florida. So I want you all to remember that uh, about 61,000 ballots were counted among 345,000 registered voters.
Yeah.
So keep that number in mind, and we'll bounce back to the Osceola County Supervisor. Yes, Osceola County Supervisor of Elections, and take a look at that number there.
Oh,
Turnout
Same deal.
17.26 for those of you all not seeing this, but 17.26% turnout. 39,000 ballots cast, registered voters, 224,000 registered voters. So keep those numbers in mind. Very close to one
Mhm.
another. So we'll go to, and this is a race that we should pay close attention to. Um, Democratic State Senator District 25. This is the nomination for the Democrat to represent the party in November for State Senate District 25. State Senate District 25 is all of Osceola County and also portions of Hunters Creek, Meadow Woods, Tafton in Orange County. And a little bit about the demographics. This is predominantly
What?
Hispanic voting in November, but not necessarily
In the
in
primary.
the primary, August.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a very white demographic, older white demographic in this primary election.
Yeah.
And as we see in the Osceola portion of this district in the vote, 53% of the voters voted, of the primary voters, voted for Kristen Arrington. In a close second, I'm sorry, not a close second,
A distant
a
second.
distant second
Torrance.
would be Carmen Torres and then Alan Grayson. And so let's start with Alan Grayson. Alan Grayson, if those of you who know your local politics, is the former congressman from generally this area. And so he got into the race very late. He was a candidate for the U.S. Senate Democratic nomination, but he jumped out. Reportedly, he invested $400,000, upwards of $400,000 between his campaign and a PAC to try to win this seat. And his results were not even close to 4,000
No.
votes.
No. And yeah, again, regardless of funding, in most cases, we're going to talk about a potential exception when we get to Orange County, because we had a late entry that did really well. Generally, that's a risky business if there's another candidate that has the same momentum you're going for, especially in a primary, like this kind of a partisan primary. If somebody in the party already has momentum, like I said, they can pick up endorsements early. They can pick up name recognition early. They can attend more events than you do. And those are things that money can't really buy, because once they're done, they're done. And, this small 17% voter turnout, a lot of these folks, like David said, a lot of them are either, that older generation that are super voters, or they're establishment party folk. Your straight reds and your straight blues. And this is the election that they actually care about. The one that they've known personally the most is often one they'll gravitate towards. And if you just got in, they don't know you, but they know your opponent, they're going to vote for your opponent, especially if they have more endorsements than you within the party and they're loyal to the party.
Sidrah, you were going to say something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And to take your point further, because you are spot on, Kellen, you are spot on. Name recognition matters. And whether it's organic or if you have to create a certain magic around your name, at the end of the day, name recognition is very important. And Alan Grayson, Congressman Grayson, has the name recognition. However, over time, it is fading. He's not as relevant anymore. It has been some time since he's been congressman. And if you're getting into a race, and if you're seen as a carpetbagger, and you're seen as seeing the opportunity and try to jump on that opportunity, people are going to be suspect, particularly those individuals who are looking and have been researching or aware of an election and of the players involved. And they want to make an educated decision, and they see that you jump in late. It's difficult. It's very difficult to gain traction, regardless of how much money you spend. It is very difficult to establish yourself when your other candidates or opposition has already done so. Carmen Torres, again, with Carmen Torres, her husband is the current state senator for District 25. So Carmen was hoping to succeed her husband as the first Democratic nominee and then eventually, hopefully, defeat the Republican nominee for this seat and keep it within the Torres family.
With just like
Unfortunately,
But just like
yes.
with Grayson, again, this can easily come across as advantageous. It can easily come across as, people. I don't think a lot of people like, big political families. I think people want their leaders to be their own people, and like that's something you hear a lot when you hear criticism. You hear it a lot with federal elections, and they say, they're not their own person. Do you want to vote for them? And they're saying, no, you want to vote for someone who is their own person. And I think Carmen doesn't come across as her own person because pretty much the same as the last one, and is directly attached to the previous administration. And because, and who knows, maybe you would even maybe Victor would just be doing work the whole time. You never know. Granted, a bit of a weird accusation to make, but I'm guessing a lot of people would be willing to make it.
Oh, definitely. I'll make it. I have my concerns about all three candidates. Where is the new blood? Chris, and we'll get to Kristen, but I'll stay on Carmen. Carmen has never held office. Her and her family, the Torres Mercado family, you have State Senator Victor Torres, and you have Orange County property appraiser Amy Mercado, their daughter. And so when you talk about these, political dynasties, the political nepotism, and I really want to lean into that nepotism part because this is what this particular race is defined. And although Carmen is a strong advocate for the Hispanic community, for organized labor, for the environment, it did not resonate. Also, it was the organization and money issue for Carmen because she was going up against a great deal of money in both Alan Grayson and Representative Kristen Arrington, and she came up short. About a less than the 1% difference between her and Alan Grayson in a distant second place. Would that have made a difference if it was just one challenger to Kristen Arrington? They still would have lost. However, again, in regards to the nepotism, the political dynasties, and the time to retire from politics, State Senator Torres is a mature citizen, and I think now is the time to pass the baton to Kristen through this election, and start building a younger bench, particularly within the Hispanic community, and retire gracefully. This is one of the political families that unfortunately did not do well in this particular primary. But, it is what it is. Next, Representative Kristen Arrington, her legislative district lies within the state district, so she is well known in the community, as the others are. However, she is one of the current state representatives that lie within the Senate district. And so there's a tactical advantage there for her, too. When we talk about political families, let's go all the way to the top here and let's look at that name right there.
I have one thing for her.
Yes, Sidrah.
Can you please scroll up?
Sure.
Yes. The Carmen one? Yeah. So I have a good job for her now. She should start the voting engagement classes for political science students now. I think that's a good job for her now.
Okay, something, that's a good idea, and perhaps we'll bring her onto the show and have that conversation with her, and maybe it's something that we could get her involved with the Leadership Academy and get her perspective. I know Carmen, I know the Taurus as well, and it'd be good to tap into that generational knowledge base that they do have. So
And
that's a
also
good
she
point.
can she can also, if she will start like this kind of education, then she will get more voters, young voters.
Yes,
So
that's
she will
true.
get more involved, and she will know about the current issues with the youth.
Right. I believe her granddaughter, her name escapes me right now, is the it's in the leadership of the Orange County Hispanic Caucus, and so we can see, and the tourists are demonstrating that they are invested into the future with their daughter as the property appraiser who went unopposed in her election. And therefore, she's seeing another 4 years as as property appraiser in Orange County. And then we're seeing the granddaughter who is in the leadership of the Orange County Hispanic Caucus. So there's some youth movement within the family, and they're getting involved. So that's a very good point, and perhaps we'll have Carmen on the show and discuss this.
Yeah.
See
But
you soon, Carmen.
back to Arrington. Um,
Yes, Let- let's-
we're back on the political family thing. We're back,
exactly. Her
and
mother-in-law is, I believe, it's her mother-in-law is the current supervisor of elections. Her name is Mary Jane Arrington. Her husband is an Osceola County, Kristen Arrington, Arrington's husband, is a current Osceola County commissioner. So when we're talking political families, the Arringtons
we found
are
one.
in that conversation. And so with the Arrington name across, and when you go to the website to look at the results, when you go to register the vote, you see Arrington. Every other week when there's a commissioner meeting, you see Arrington. For some people in the district, their representative is Arrington. How formidable is that? And that's going to be a challenge for the Republican nominee, Jose Martinez, to deal with, to face in November. But this is one of the most powerful political families in the county, let alone in Central Florida, and probably one of the more influential political families in the state.
Yeah. And a little contrast between Kristen and Carmen. Kristen has actually held public office before.
That's correct.
And this is a bit of a higher seat than the one Kristen is holding now. It's a bit of a thing to jump to. And this is a different seat from what she was running from before and different from her family members. That's an important strategic bit there because Carmen is running for the exact same seat that her husband holds now, which I think comes across as very different to someone whose family members also just happen to be elected officials elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier to kind of deflect the nepotism for Kristen than it is for Carmen.
Indeed. And for the Jose Martinez campaign, and we'll talk about that particular race, this is something that they need to hone into, especially one of the vulnerabilities of a representative Kristen Arrington campaign is the fact that she is one of very few Democrats in the legislature because the Republicans currently hold a supermajority.
Right.
The Democrats have been, for all purposes, ineffectual. They have not delivered for their districts like the Republicans have. And therefore, this is something that Arrington will have to overcome in her campaigning, and something that the Martinez campaign needs to hammer in his campaigning.
Yeah.
And of course, the nepotism.
Of course.
Okay, moving to State Senate District 46. The outcome for this particular race is a winner takes all. We have former mayor of Kissimmee, Jose Alvarez, winning this particular race. At one point, J&W in 2023 was representing Jacqueline Centano, and unfortunately, Jacqueline came up very short, along with Robert Llewellyn Johnson and Vanessa Alvarez, who joined the race very late. It's a sad showing for Jacqueline, who has been an advocate for her community for years. She is a vice principal at a local Osceola school. She has done wonderful work in Osceola and Orange County. She's a military veteran, and this is one of those situations where both she and Johnson, who's run before, should pack it up and retire from politics.
Yeah. And with Centano, she did start early, but if you're not fundraising properly and you're not sticking to your plan properly, you're not going to win anyways.
Yeah.
Because even a short campaign because even though we'll rag on anybody who jumps in super late, because normally it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But a campaign that's run really well for a relatively short period of time can still beat a campaign that's been running like crap for a long period of time. Quality is just not. It's also very important to always get in early, but quality. It will not make up for a lack of quality with your campaign, a lack of consistency with your campaign. It won't make up for those things. And I think that if there's one lesson to take away from this race, it's that.
Jacqueline did not invest in her campaign, despite genuine offers of assistance for fundraising. Her campaign just went off the rails, and the commitment shown to it was disappointing. I believe that she was the favorite until more and more people joined the race, particularly Vanessa Alvarez.
Yeah.
However, again, even though Jackie started early, she did not sustain her campaign with the fundraising that was required and the organization that was required to end this campaign on a positive note with a win. Jose Alvarez, again, former Mayor of Kissimmee, well known. I believe he worked in the Obama administration, or even, on the Biden administration in housing. So when Mayor Alvarez joined the race, he came with a great deal of resources and name recognition, and he prevailed with only 6,800
Wow.
votes. Anyone could have won this race. And he won it with 2,700 votes. And so he moves on to the general election in November. This also is the former seat of Kristen Arrington. This is the seat that she's leaving in order to become the state Senate seat that Senator Victor Torres is termed out of. So,
and now we're going on to this crazy election. Look at this one.
This District 47, the Democratic nomination side of State Representative District 47 primary. Okay, Andrew Yang has run several times. Anthony Nieves has run several times. And now Maria Rivas is the nominee coming into this race late. Coming into this race without any strong organization. Coming into this race with a lot of momentum from the Democratic elite, the Democratic establishment supporting her and actually endorsing her. And what breaks my heart about this particular race is that Andrew and Anthony got into this race very early. And I know Anthony more than I do Andrew. And Anthony was working, trying to be everywhere all at once. And to see the final results just for him of 2,100 votes after all the work that he put into this. And it's sad. And then with all the work he put into this and the strong request for the party support, Maria jumps into this race. She checked the boxes that the Democrats like, minority female, they give her the support, and with very little time, very little resources, she comes out on top by approximately 2.5 percentage points over Andrew. And she is now the Democratic representative, or I'm sorry, the Democratic nominee for District 47.
But it was an interesting and tough competition between them. Like, it's tough. 31, 33, 35. It's like literally.
Very close. It was anyone's race. And it came down to a matter of turnout and turning out your specific voters. And District 47 encompasses Poinciana and parts of Kissimmee, mostly Kissimmee. And you have a high density, high concentration of votes there. And it's one of the districts that is the demographic is strong. It's a strong Hispanic demographic, and look at those numbers. A total of approximately 6,800 voters actually voted in this particular race, and that's pretty sad. That's pretty sad. Yeah. And it also reinforces that our Hispanic demographic is difficult to engage them and persuade them to turn out to vote in these primaries. Good luck to Maria, because she will face in November Republican Representative Paula Stark. She is the incumbent. And Paula Stark defeated Anthony Nieves in the last election for this seat 2 years ago in the general election in 2022 by a very close margin. This particular election in November is targeted by both parties. The Democrats want this seat back because it was once held by a Democrat. And so District 47 is high on the list for the Democrats to take back. Paula Stark has been a phenomenal, in my opinion, state representative for the area, long ties to the community, and also in full disclosure for everyone, her significant other, John Davis, JD is what he goes by. Is a friend of the J&Washington network because he was a guest commentator for this very show. You can't make this shit up. And he gave us a great deal of insight as to what was happening in Tallahassee, the thinking behind the votes, and just some insider, insider information about how the sausage is made. And so at a recent hobnob in Osceola County, I had the opportunity to meet Representative Starks, and we had a really good conversation. I've spoken with Maria on the phone and had a really great conversation. Paula Stark is formidable. Would the Republicans support her the way the Democrats are supporting Maria Rivas? We shall see. But this is definitely a race to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you know that meme where like the two Spider-Mans are pointing at each other?
Yes.
Introducing the Dem Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller.
Wow.
I got nothing.
Nothing. Kevin Soto is the incumbent, and to have two Sotos on the ballot for the Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller for a Democratic nomination, that's just wild. But Kevin was able to elk out a victory with 53% of the vote versus Jennifer Soto's 47% of the vote. And I've had some interactions with the Clerk of the Circuit Court here in Osceola County, and I must say that Kevin Soto's office has been phenomenal. So congratulations to Mr. Soto. All right, here we go.
Sarah. Now, so this was a race that J&W was very invested in for quite a while because we were on with the Amorelos Riviera campaign. Now, we didn't sustain that relationship, and there were some issues with the campaign.
Yeah.
We definitely considered at one point that she could be the favorite because she kind of stood out from this crowd a lot. Demographically, she stood out from this group a lot while also having all the checkboxes you want for a sheriff. As you can see, she came in fourth. Again, just like with Centano, you can start early, but if you don't sustain your momentum, you lose it. Use it or lose it, and she lost it, unfortunately.
And that's correct. She lost the momentum. The vanity of being perhaps the very first Latina sheriff in Florida was not enough to sustain her campaign. Amorelos did not take the time and the effort to invest in her campaign. She did not create the organization in the campaign that she needed early to make a difference. Amorelos relied on a lot of what I say gimmicks to draw voters to her instead of going to voters and making a case for herself in her candidacy. And it's great that you have meet and greets and things like that. However, you have to give voters a reason to come out on a Saturday morning or a Thursday night and participate in these events where they could just rather stay home and see a movie. You have to create the excitement and the name recognition and a sense of a cult of personality in a way to draw people to you consistently. Not everyone is charismatic like a Barack Obama.
Right.
And you don't have, if you don't have the charisma, if you don't have the type of personality that people will gravitate to you either don't have it or you have to create it. And
Right.
Unfortunately, again, the novelty of being the first Latina sheriff
It's not enough on its own.
it wasn't enough. And so Sheriff Marcos Lopez wins this race
Okay.
against former Sheriff Russ Gibson and also a former commander or lieutenant, I cannot recall, but Wiley Black was also a employee under the Lopez administration, just like Amorelos and Russ Gibson was a former sheriff. For Russ, this is his, I believe, third election run for sheriff. He was sheriff before in Osceola County. He lost his bid for reelection to Sheriff Lopez 4 years ago. And again, for Russ Gibson losing this particular election, coming in third place. I think this is one of those opportunities, again, for a candidate like Russ Gibson to kind of pack it up and retire from politics.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, moving on.
The
Well, isn't that a familiar name? We're looking
back. Winning it again.
We are looking at the Democratic County Commissioner District 3 election between Brandon Arrington, Commissioner incumbent Brandon Arrington, and Democratic challenger Debbie Rambis.
Huge difference. Oh my God.
Oh, yes. Commissioner Arrington, he just rolled with 62% of the vote versus 38% of the vote for Debbie. Again, the total number of ballots cast were 4,200. Anyone can win these races. 4,200 votes.
That's
And so
insane.
this is crazy. And when you look at the general turnout for these elections, for Osceola County, it was 17.7%, or 17%. Let's just say that. But when you drill down to these other races, to these county commissioner races or sheriff races or even state races, the undervote is phenomenal. And turnout for those particular votes is even lower than 17%.
Yeah.
And for the Democrats, and we'll see this in Orange County, but for Seminole County and Osceola County, with the turnout being as low as it is, this is an indictment of both parties, particularly the Democratic Party, because in Seminole County, the Democrats are trying to make headway. They're trying to make a difference. And politics is local. And these primary elections are the elections where the decision for your local electeds are made.
Right.
For the most part, they're made. So many of these races don't go to November. As we see here in Osceola County also, many of these races are determined in the primary. And so the electorate, whether it's disengaged, uninformed, misinformed, or just don't care, apathy about the process, whatever efforts or lack of effort by the political parties, particularly the Democrats, like here in Osceola County, they're not engaging the electorate enough to the point where they are excited that they are turning out in numbers better than the election before. So
And I think, and going to like your being informed thing, the messaging I commonly see out is turn out for the primaries. That's and I think a lot of people don't realize that some actual seats, like handovers, are pretty much done in August. Like a lot of these things,
Yeah.
Like in a lot of ways, this is the more important election because a lot of seats are just like one of them is just going to be stuck as the winner. One of them is going to be stuck as the loser. That's how this is going to be. This is and given the lower turnout, this is the one that you actually have any impact on. And yeah, if you don't turn out, things aren't going to change. And then there's also the issue of, I guess, apathy about the process or just like lack of knowledge on the process. You know, they don't know why they should care. They don't understand why this election is so important. You know, maybe they're an NPA. You know, they don't think that they have any place here. You know, a lot, and then it is important to count. It is important to remember Democrats have shed a lot of numbers to what are now NPAs. A lot of NPAs now. So the base that's left, however much is left, I forget the numbers, however many are left, you really got to turn them out. Otherwise, you're getting nowhere. Because as long as you shed numbers to NPAs, you're going to be on the struggle bus.
That's a very good point. You're right. You're very right. We see the Republican nominees for United States Senator. It's no surprise that Rick Scott rolled over Keith Gross and John Columbus. John Columbus being a actor from Disney, very organic campaign. This is his very first election, and a promising candidate. But perhaps it's better that John starts local than try to shoot for the stars, particularly against a candidate like Rick Scott.
Yeah, an incumbent for the U.S. Senate.
Yes.
But David, here is a Scott like, oh, this is my seat. This is my election. Nobody can steal this. Like, he's 81%. Come on, man.
Yes,
and the other guys are 7 or 11%. Like, no, you're just the peanuts in front of me.
Yeah, there's a couple things to know about Scott's seat. One is that incumbents in the U.S. Senate enjoy crazy advantages. Those seats are really difficult to flip.
Yes.
We saw a decent bid in 2020, but Senate seats rarely flip, even in contentious districts. And while Scott himself has never enjoyed a particularly high approval rating, and every outlet will always say, "Oh, there's a high chance of flipping," he has a lot of money behind him. He has a lot of establishment behind him, and he stated before that he wants to succeed Mitch McConnell. And as silly as it might sound, that is in itself almost an attractive quality. It's one of the reasons why McConnell is so popular in Kentucky. It's because our state's important. I think Rick Scott brings that gravitas with him. And then there's the issues of his two opponents, the issues they faced. Columbus, right now, I mean, being attached to Disney, you probably used to be an advantage for the Republican Party because of how social they've gotten with Disney. Even if business-wise, they're very aligned, policy-wise, they're very aligned in a lot of ways. Socially, that can be a shot in the foot. And Keith Gross, while he did actually have a good bit of money behind him,
Yes.
he also had a good amount of campaign finance misrepresentation and protocol violation behind him too. In fact, I don't think I found any news stories about Keith Gross that weren't about his financial scandals, even one. So he stood no real chance that was all the coverage he was going to get. And even then, it's big outlets didn't even give him the light of day, so he stood no chance. And that's the other thing. It's a lot of these networks have spoken about Scott before. They know Scott. Some of them even have relationships with Scott.
Yeah.
And they presume Scott to be the nominee. They're not going to give these people a light of day. It's
You're
just
right.
how it is.
You're right. And we had the opportunity to have Keith Gross introduce himself to you and I
Yep.
personally, Kellen. And, I admire his
Go-getter energy.
enthusiasm.
Let's go get our energy with him.
Yes.
He's very enthusiastic to run.
Yes, and he has a place in politics, perhaps not as the nominee for the Republicans for state senate. However, again, it's one of those opportunities to say, "Hey, just like with John Columbus, let's start locally, and then build your momentum, your name recognition, your political network there." So
yeah, I think Keith. I mean, he's very ambitious, and I admire that. But I think Keith would do well to go for state house or state senate, not
Agreed.
United States Senate.
Agreed.
Because I think he could. I think depending on where he lives, I don't know where he lives. Depending on where he lives, he could. He definitely has the money and connections. He could definitely run an effective campaign. And again, he's on the younger end. He's on the high energy end. He could snag a state seat and maybe use that to form more connections within the Florida establishment. And then, maybe one day Scott retires or the Republicans are falling out of favor with him, and then he swoops in. Or maybe he goes against the seat that is right now held by Rubio.
Yeah, good point. I agree. So next we have the representative, the Republican nominee for representative in Congressional District Number 9, which is currently held by Democrat Darren Soto, who did not have a Democratic challenger in his primary. So we have Thomas Califo, or Chalifo. I cannot pronounce his name.
I don't know.
I believe he is former military. Chalifaux. He won with. Thank you, Sidrah. Thomas won with 51% of the votes amongst Republicans, a decent turnout of about 15,000 voters in that particular election. So this will be an interesting election. Again, incumbent Darren Soto will be facing off against a challenger, Mr. The name again?
Which one? The John one?
Thomas.
Thomas Califox.
Thank you, Thomas Halifax. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we move to the Republican nominee for Attorney General, State Attorney, Ninth Judicial Circuit.
Yeah, we're just going over some like statewide stuff right now. I guess is the one that we're doing it in.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I believe last time we saw Seth Hyman in the news was the headpiece against supervisor of elections in Orange County, Glenn Gilzine.
Yes. Yes.
Just a weird anecdote, but that's the last time I remember seeing him in the news. It was just a weird
correct.
weird way to have that.
And to add to that, because Seth did complain that he wasn't informed of the process to qualify for the ballot by petition, he wasn't kept informed. And we've interviewed Seth here in our on You Can't Make This Shit Up, and he told us that his campaign was being run by folks out of California or stuff like that. And I kind of looked at him and said, Seth, campaigns are local. And, I get the same pushback when, someone from, Georgia or Kentucky, comes to us, say, hey, I want you all to run my campaign. And, but however, campaigns are local, and they have a organization from California, come in and try to run a judicial circuit campaign for state attorney. That's just way off. And, we said, hey, Seth, you may want to reconsider that. And not because we want this business, because we know
it's a challenge.
Politics is local. Yes.
Yeah. Every supervisor of elections office does things a little bit differently. And the state election laws of California compared here are quite different, especially now with the Republican supermajority, how many little changes they've made. It's a lot to keep up with. And for people that don't live in the state to keep up with it is a bit of an ask.
Yes.
Hopefully they'll have Seth will have fewer problems in the general.
Well, Seth is facing the current state's attorney for the Ninth Circuit, and Andrew Bain, Judge Bain, and also the Democrat nominee, Monique Worrell, who was the state's attorney before she was suspended by Governor DeSantis, and then Judge Bain was appointed to her seat. So this is very interesting. And a little side note, besides the allegations that Seth made in regards to the supervisor of elections not keeping him informed about the petition process, thus him having to pay the fee, a hefty fee, his challenger in this Republican primary for state's attorney, Thomas Fighter, broadcast a very lengthy and kind of cringeworthy video about how Seth, even though Seth started first in this campaign for this nomination, called Seth a ghost candidate or a puppet of the Worrell campaign. And I saw the video and I was just like, oh my God, this is sad. This is pathetic.
So David, which one's sadder, the Thomas Fighter video or Joy in the House? Ooh. They're both sad in unique ways.
They are. They both are sad in unique ways.
Orange County Commission District 5 candidates, Joy Goff, as part of her campaign material, like digital campaign material, had a rap called "Joy in the House." It's horrendous.
It is, and I'm going to give it to Thomas because his video just went on and on and on, and it was at best sad, at worst pathetic, and it was a lot of complaining. And I don't want to do my research and hear a candidate complain about someone else. and disparage someone else. I want to hear about the candidate and what they're going to bring to that particular office and how they're going to represent the community's best interests. And this particular video, to me, seemed desperate for votes. And congratulations to Seth Hyman for pulling out a win, 56 to 54. I'm sorry, 56 to 44 percent. It's going to be a tough race for Seth versus Judge Bain versus Monique Worrell, and this one the races to watch closely.
Yeah.
So one of my
Jose,
favorites. One of my favorites here, State Senate Senator District 25, the Republican nominee primary. And so we talked about the Democratic State Senator District 25 nominee, which will be Kristen Arrington. She will face off against businessman Jose Martinez, who won overwhelmingly with 60% of the vote versus current school board member John Arguello, who sat in a Alianza for Progress forum with Alan Grayson and Carmen Torres in front of a progressive audience. And John is very conservative, and he held his own. Now, his views are sometimes way out there. However, he was able to articulate his views, where he stood, his values, his purpose in front of a rather difficult crowd of progressives and liberals and Democrats. And he performed well. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that he went into, air quotes, hostile territory and made a case for his candidacy. Unfortunately, Jose Martinez did not. It would have been great to see him there. However, of course, as we see, it did not affect the turnout for him and him securing as a second-time candidate, because he ran for St. Cloud commissioner and lost. Mm-hmm. But to see him rebound and win this nomination for the Republican nomination for District 25 with 60% of the vote against a well-known current elected in Osceola County.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of those other very interesting races.
Indeed.
We've already been going through an hour, so we're gonna try to speed through Osceola a little here. State District 25, State Representative District 35. Sorry, we are getting a rematch.
Yes,
if
we
you
are.
don't know, there was an election, a special election, where it was between Erica Booth and current Representative Tom Keene. Tom Keene won by like hair's width. He managed to win it, and the Republicans are going back with Erica Booth. They came out swinging, really getting behind her campaign. They believe they can get it this time. They've managed to get a little bit of news about Keene, like a little things about just him being like unkempt more or less, and maybe a little laid back for a voter's taste. I don't know how much of a difference it'll make. The people of House District 35 might just want to like keep somebody in for a while, might just want to not flip flop all the time. It'll be very interesting to see whether or not the turnout and pattern actually changes at all. I'd be very interested to see.
Indeed. That'll be a race that we will be paying close attention to. And again, I believe it will come down to the non-party affiliates, the NPAs, to determine that race between current Representative Tom Keene and Republican challenger Erica Booth.
Yeah.
Before we go to Orange County, I just want to jump down to
the last one.
Another race, school board. And
the last one?
Yes, that's correct.
Sounds good.
You hold on. Let's get back up. We missed one.
Which one would you like to look at?
That one.
The circuit.
The 9th Judicial Circuit. This was one that was in Orange and Osceola. This was a case of a candidate starting very, very late.
Yes.
And failing to raise funds in that short period of time to get the messages out. Judicial races are an uphill battle. The incumbents always win, like every time. They can be they can be like the least popular judge in the world, and they will still have an advantage. If you know anything about judicial races, is quite bad, because it's really hard to sift through judicial candidates as a voter. It's really hard because if you don't know somebody that's worked in the system, or you don't look at their rulings and read, how the hell are you supposed to know the difference? Most of the time, you don't know the difference.
Yeah.
And while there were definitely interesting differences between the two in this particular race, again, Jason started so late. I think he would have had the opportunity to be a real challenger had he started early, because Wilson is not the most popular judge. But again, if you start too late, you start too late. If he started early, and if he had more money behind him, more support, that was the other issue of starting late, is that because the legal community is such a small community, they're not going to want to get behind you unless you're going to win, because they're going to work with they're going to work with whoever the judge is, lawyers, and other members of the legal community. They're going to work with these judges, so they don't want to get behind a candidate that's in too late to win. And I think that was what happened with Jason. I think it would have been very interesting to see what would have happened had he started much earlier.
Agree. I agree. And in full disclosure, we worked with J&W, consulted with Jason Willis on his campaign, and the biggest deficit to overcome was the fact that he did join the campaign very, very late against Judge Wilson, and also a lot of the potential fundraising was dried up prior to his joining the race. He did admirable with 38% of the vote here in Osceola County, slightly lower in Orange County, but it was an admirable effort by Jason.
It was like a 2-month campaign or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Just a 2 month.
It was 2 months and change, but it was crazy. Like we were talking, like we were saying, this was late.
Very late.
Very late.
At least you have to start like 6 months ago if you really want to win.
Yeah.
And for a judicial race, I even recommend a lot sooner, because in judicial races, a candidate cannot campaign for themselves. So they have a committee that fundraises for them, that campaigns for the candidate. And because of Canon 7, there are restrictions on the candidate as a lawyer running for judicial office, that they are permitted and limited in their activities. So you have to start even earlier to get the name recognition out there, especially among the legal community, that will advocate for your candidacy or not. 6 months, 2 months, 3 months, 8 months, even a year is not enough to do that, especially when you take on the incumbent.
And you also need a good team. You need a plan for your campaign. You need more people, young people for your campaigns. Otherwise, how do you feel like within 2 months you can't even make connections with the people? So what is this? Very sorry, Jason. Very sorry.
Yep. Jason's going to still stick out the fight, and he agrees. We started late. The fundraising wasn't there, but he is still involved in the political space, particularly within the legal community, and look forward to hearing from him and working with him in the future. He's a friend of ours.
Yeah, great guy. This is an appetizer race, really.
Indeed. And so I want to go to the school board member District 3 race. And we have Anthony Cook, a progressive, winning that race with 55% of the vote, versus Julia Tavares with 29% of the vote. Julia being a very conservative candidate for school board. Although this is a nonpartisan race, she identifies as a conservative Republican. Anthony Cook identifies as progressive. And then there's Angel Koba, a military veteran, new to politics. Unfortunately, he was hoping for a better result. We're friends. J&W is friends with Angel. And he came out on the losing end, unfortunately, with 15% of the vote. But Angel's a really good man, young father. Again, a veteran of the military, and someone who is hopeful to run for office in the future. So congratulations to all the candidates who move forward in Osceola County. Let's jump into Orange County.